If you're new to the culture war, Megan and I welcome you, okay?
They shouldn't hear things that make them feel comfortable and like, yes, I have the same worldview that is being preached from that pulpit.
They're like, you're right, there is a lot of bad in the world. So a lot of Christians, they're not in this fight as much as you are, just got radicalized for the culture war in the last 2 weeks.
Yes, I want Democrats to come to church. Definitely come to church, but they shouldn't be comfortable there.
I'm just gonna read it for people. How evangelical leaders cut off their testicles for a leftist agenda. No, that's not what it's called. That's not what it's called. Guys, let's talk about big Evas. Okay, that's big evangelicalism for the new listeners, right? You know, there's big pharma, right? You've heard of that, right? There's big tech, right? There's also big evangelicalism. Their disgusting response to my friend Charlie Kirk's assassination and martyrdom. Megan Basham. What a heroine. Joins me today to cover everything you've been seeing circulating from Big Eva, who can't figure out how to tiptoe around Charlie's murder while still being politically correct and winsome. I'm not sure what's worse, honestly. Christianity Today's asinine article titled, "Died Charlie Kirk, activist who championed MAGA doctrine," or Brett McCracken and the Gospel Coalition's extreme switch up from bashing conservatives like Charlie engaged in the political fight to applauding Charlie Kirk's legacy, which apparently has people primed for renewal and revival. Sometimes the enemy isn't who you think they are. And the scales are falling off a lot of people's eyes since our dear friend was murdered. I hope you begin to see who the enemy really is. And sometimes they're the people that you used to love. Give us a rating and review. Help us reach more people, guys. We don't beat around the bush here. You know that. A Rubicon line's been crossed. And I'm committed to working harder, studying more, researching more, and going harder than ever before. I don't know how much time we have left to safeguard this wonderful civilization that is the last best hope of man on earth, to quote Reagan, and preserve freedom and liberty for our children and grandchildren. But the fight is now. And when you hit 5 stars on iTunes, on Spotify, send the episode to a friend, to a pastor who's starting to wake up that this was all spiritual. You help this show more, and we get the comments of babies who have been saved, minds that have been changed, pastors that have been spurred on. Your little act of doing that helps a lot. Go subscribe at YouTube. YouTube digitally assassinated me for 48 hours the other day. They said we posted nudity, and then they put the channel back, and they said that we didn't do anything wrong. What does that tell you? Go subscribe at Rumble, okay, in case the digital assassins at Google ever axe my channel again. And join us at the White Rose Resistance. We are establishing more White Rose Resistance chapters around the country, getting the local church engaged against abortion, the sex trans cult mob, the evil targeting our children and our society. We need Christian resistance. And when you go to thewhiterose.life and sign up at $35 a month, thewhiterose.life, and you sign up at $35 or $70 a month, get your battle box in the mail at $70 a month. You get the book club, we call it Books in the Barracks. We read books together. We do need your help as we're trying to work ourselves out of a job by getting the church to take back its duty. Thewhiterose.life. Let's get into it. This is the Seth Gruber Show. Megan, thank you for joining us again. It's weird to only talk about Charlie for weeks, but such was the man he was, and such was the nature of his personality, his talent, his commitment. It's rocked people in such an incredible way that over a week later, no one wants to talk about anything else. And I think that we could probably talk about why that is. I've shared a little bit about why I believe that is. But the most heartbreaking thing for me is when I see warrior brothers, warrior sisters. It's one of the reasons that my whole team and Olivia and I love you so much, and why we defend you, because when you see the people, the 1 or 2% up front who take all the arrows, and then the armchair theologians, the armchair evangelicals hurling insults about how you're just a political operative. You prostituted your faith to the GOP. You've traded your birthright for a bowl of porridge. You've lost sight of what the main thing is. And yet their way of life, probably their income, their smaller taxes, their safe neighborhoods, their safe children, et cetera, are only that way because of the fighters up front. And so that's what I get so angry about, is seeing so-called Christians and brothers and sisters who can't even honor someone who fought for basically like almost all of the primary Christian issues they believe in. And worse yet, maligning and attacking someone like that. And so I was like, oh gosh, like this aligns with everything Megan talks about. Megan's been trying to tell people, this is who evangelical institutional managerialism class looks like. They're not Christian leaders. It's so hard to talk about that because it's so nasty. But what have you been seeing in the churches or the Christian leaders' response to literally a Christian martyr?
Yeah, the strangest thing for me is watching people who are now in the position of having to acknowledge Charlie Kirk's enormous outsized influence and the kingdom work that he did and how many young people he drew to Christ. And they're acknowledging that now. They are. But these were the same people who would have absolutely and did absolutely keep him at arm's length and sort of sneered at his influence prior to his death. And so that's been a little hard to process. And I think part of what, I'll just say bluntly, has irritated me since his death is watching the responses coming from that managerial class that you're bringing up. And it's very much we have a political problem. We have our cultural problem. And, my response has been, we don't have a general political problem. We have a leftism problem. And even now that leftism has killed Charlie Kirk because it was a specific ideology in that kid's head that caused him to pull the trigger. And they're not calling that out. So initially, in the immediate aftermath of the news that he had been assassinated, like the Gospel Coalition put out this article about how do we process bad things that happen. And it was in poor taste because it was repackaging of a book that editor Colin Hansen had already previously written. So it wasn't even necessarily reflections on Charlie. So I thought that was in bad taste generally. But its take was, how do we respond to things like war and gangs and drug trafficking and just sort of general bad things that happen in life? And that's not what killed Charlie Kirk. I mean, yes.
So they were saying that, and they were also lumping in the assassination martyrdom of Charlie, you're saying, into that?
Yes. And so it was in a list of how do we grapple with things like the war in Ukraine and drug trafficking and now the death of Charlie Kirk. And
why do they do that? For the Christian listening who's maybe a little newer, listen, let's be honest, a lot of Christians just got radicalized for the culture war in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
So, but you're already seasoned. So listen, if you're new to the culture war, Megan and I welcome you. Okay. Thanks for coming to the party late. It's exciting up here. But Megan, in your sweet manner, and maybe a little bit spicy and rude too. I hope you are. Help people understand why they do that, because a lot of Christians, they're not in this fight as much as you are, and so they see that, they're like, you're right, there is a lot of bad in the world.
Right.
But why do evangelical like institutions, publications, books, famous authors, why do they do that? Why do they take like war and Antifa and climate change, and, maybe someone with the last name Ortland, and abortion and Charlie Kirk assassinated, shot in the head? I mean, why do they lump them together? Because I think I know the answer, but I've never asked you that before.
No, and so I'll give you and I actually wrote sort of a viral tweet this week that identified what I think the reason is, and it is because they have worked so hard to insinuate themselves with progressives, with the left. They have tried to attract that audience. They have tried to find any front that they can to align with that audience. We saw that with George Floyd. We saw that in 2020. We've seen it with climate change. Like, they will sort of find any issue they can that is not so blatantly anti-biblical that they could sort of package it as sort of churchy and align with it. And so now, if they're honest about what killed Charlie Kirk, then they're going to anger the very people that they have invested so much time trying to attract. And in fact, let me tell you, if you want to see an example of this, go look at Pastor Matt Chandler, who, is a well-known megachurch pastor out of Texas, who was very much on board the critical race theory, social justice. He advocated for apologizing for your white privilege and things like that. And he actually put out a post that just lamented Charlie Kirk's death specifically and said, I'm really sad about this day that happened, which is what David Platt did. Like, David Platt put out sort of a whole post kind of being sad about Charlie Kirk without ever saying his name even. So when Matt Chandler posted that, suddenly he had, as you would expect, all of his left-wing followers losing their minds. Like, how dare you praise this person that we've been calling a racist for the last 10 years? And that's why all of these other groups have been sort of vague about it. And they can't say, we rebuke and we call out this ideology of transgenderism, of leftism, of Marxism that martyred Charlie Kirk. They can't say that because those are the same people they've been trying to attract and create some kind of room for their ideology.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Gosh, Megan, your tweet, I'm just going to read it for people.
Okay.
Because everyone needs to go follow Megan Basham, pick up her book, Shepherds for Sale, how evangelical leaders cut off their testicles for a leftist agenda. No, that's not what it's called. That's not what it's called.
Books if I'd have time.
You said, do you know why we've seen the Gospel Coalition, Christianity Today, and other evangelical leaders trying to suggest Charlie Kirk's death is a result of a generic political problem and not concentrated on one side? Because they have coddled and accommodated that side for years, trying to pretend that their positions on climate change or gun control or Marxist anti-racism were the moral equivalents of trying to rescue babies in the womb and children from the trans surgeons. So now they're not in a position to address what happened Wednesday. So Matt Chandler, okay. Do you remember when he was on the Lecrae show? I mean, he was like, oh man, I could just be, he took one of Hunter Biden's like blunts, and he was just like, the left wants the kingdom and not the king. And the right wants the king, but not the kingdom.
I don't even know what that means.
And Lecrae goes, that's good. And I'm like, so the left wants the kingdom and the right doesn't. I didn't know that chopping the penises off of 14-year-old boys was the kingdom of God. Silly me. I didn't know fourth trimester abortions and allowing babies who survived botched failed abortion attempts to be killed. I just didn't know that was the kingdom of God. But that's the kind of junk that's been coming from Matt Chandler. And the fact that he got attacked by so many people for actually specifically mourning Charlie's murder kind of tells you everything you need to know. It's like, well, I don't have that many nasty comments in my Instagram unless something goes viral, because most of the people who follow me agree with me. And so anytime you see that, you're like, wait, why do you have so many leftist Christians who follow you?
Every single comment. I read for a while, and every single one was like, was expressing some level of disappointment in you, Matt Chandler, for honoring Charlie Kirk.
Wow.
So, and look, you can also look at, I'm sure you've seen the viral comparison between how Christianity Today covered the death of George Floyd, who they said had a gospel legacy, and Charlie Kirk, who they said dies. They didn't say assassinated. They didn't say martyred. They didn't say killed. They just said dies. And they said that he was an activist for the MAGA doctrine. So George Floyd gets who was a career criminal. I mean, if he had some element in his life, and I'm happy to hear that he did, where he was maybe trying to turn over a new leaf, but he was clearly still struggling because he was on a massive amount of drugs at the time that he died, and he was a career criminal. And he receives gospel legacy headline from Christianity Today. And Charlie Kirk, a young husband and father who has brought, we have no idea, but probably thousands of young people to Christ, he gets activist for the MAGA doctrine. And that just tells you like where Christianity Today aligns.
Yep. Here's the headline, just so everyone can go prove it to themselves from Megan. Died Charlie Kirk, activist who championed MAGA doctrine with a debate style honed for college campuses and social media. It's like, wow, he just died, Megan. That's crazy. He just died. I wonder how he died. Mm-hmm. I guess they don't want to tell you that in their headline. We now know, of course, that George Floyd had enough fentanyl in him to kill a fully grown horse. And so we now know that Derek Chauvin is not the responsible, is not the direct cause of George Floyd's death. And yet we know exactly how they think that he died. Right. But if you get sniped in the throat from 200 yards away, you just died. You just died. I mean, you have traced for some time now why Christianity Today and many of these folks write like this, why they seem to always placate the left. Can you remind listeners, because it's been a few months since you've been on, and sometimes I can't keep track of all the different funders because there's so many of them. Mm-hmm. Who are some of the biggest funders of Billy Graham's once great Christian publication, Christianity Today?
Yeah, so they are now being funded to the tune of millions by the Lilly Endowment, which is the charitable arm of the Eli Lilly pharmaceutical company. And if you look at the board and the leadership of the Lilly Endowment, it is very left. And they give a lot of money to seminaries that promote abortion and the LGBTQ movement. So they will give money to other religious organizations, but they're the kind, that have pride flags and BLM flags outside of their seminaries and essentially whitewash tombs. So it's interesting that, they now fund Christianity Today among them. And for those of your listeners who maybe have not heard you and I have a conversation before, you ask me, why would Christianity Today run a headline like that that's appeasing the left? And it is because Christianity Today is staffed with the left. I did a story a couple of years ago showing that including their editorial staff and some of their board members and executives, had all made some extensive political donations. They all went to Democrats, every single one, including their news editor, Daniel Silliman, at that time, their CEO, Tim Dalrymple. So every single donor on their staff who had made political donations to some political figure, every single one was to Democrats. So they are Democrats. That's why you see this. So now they're in this very awkward position when you have this outpouring of love and affection from Christians for what Charlie Kirk did for the kingdom. They can't join that. And they know they can't join it because they know they have spent the last 10 years disparaging the work of Charlie Kirk. So, I think even a gospel coalition is in an awkward position here because maybe they didn't go out of their way to disparage Charlie Kirk as overtly as Christianity Today, but certainly they did not want to, be seen to be aligned with him in any way. They wouldn't have wanted to, anybody to think they were part of the same project because they are above the dirty work of politics and setting policy and the things that actually save lives and change lives here in this world. They find all that, unseemly. So they don't do that. They have the Keller model of third way, which is we don't join political coalitions. We do this sort of, golden mean between the right and the left. which, as the left has gotten so extreme, is still left. It's just a little bit left.
So, Megan, let's say someone's listening right now, and on Sunday, they walked away very disappointed and angry that their pastor said nothing. Maybe they just left Rick Warren's church, which is pastored by Woody and Bo Peep from Toy Story. Oh, sorry. That's just how their senior pastors dressed up for a sermon series on the gospel themes in Toy Story. Or maybe they left, a church like that. And they're like, I'm ready to fight. Charlie fought as a happy warrior for these causes. I'm ready to fight. They're listening to Megan Basham, and they're like, I don't even know what third wayism is.
Right.
What the heck are you? I thought Tim Keller's meaning of marriage and reason for God was just beautiful. What a precious man. Can you go down to the elementary school level for us and explain what is third wayism and why did Tim Keller, why did he sort of epitomize what was the very hip, sexy, normal way for evangelicals to engage the culture?
I'm glad you bring this up, because one of the interesting developments over the last few days as people are processing Charlie's death has been they are comparing his approach specifically to Tim Keller's approach. And I'm seeing people get upset about that comparison. I'm seeing some people dive right in, but I think it's an apt one, because there's a really strong contrast between the way these two men approached doing apologetics and witnessing. So Tim Keller's third way approach is to say, the Bible is not right or left, or, we don't follow a donkey or an elephant. We follow Christ, which is true, because there are things within the Republican Party that I no longer agree with. For example, when they took abortion out of the GOP platform, I was upset, and I wrote an essay in a national publication saying, I'm upset about this. So I get that, but that's not what Keller was about. So when he engaged politics, it was, we have to be somewhere in the center so that we are not offending those on our left. And to be honest with you, they would say we're trying not to offend those on our right either, but yet they did. I mean, Keller did go to this secret meeting about what are we going to do about how evangelical support of Donald Trump is destroying the evangelical witness. He gave interviews about that, and he did that. So he was very plain that he thought evangelical support of Donald Trump was destroying Christian witness in America. So that's where he was. He felt like we needed to not take a side. Charlie Kirk obviously did something very different. He said, because scripture says this, and because it teaches this, because it teaches that every person is made in the image of God, because it teaches male and female, he created them, because it teaches private property ownership and that you shall not covet and envy your neighbor's stuff. Because of that, we have to be political, because the Bible is political. It takes a position on these policies. And so he went about it in an entirely different way. And he went onto these college campuses and didn't apologize for choosing a side. He said, yes, I choose a side, and this side, because the Republican Party and the right is more aligned with the Bible than the left by a long shot. And so I am a Christian. Here's why I choose these policies. Here's why I align with the GOP. Here's why I support Donald Trump. Totally different model. And as we can see, that model changed hearts and minds, because he was explaining, here's why we believe what we believe because of scripture. Whereas you had Keller, bluntly, he did write some good things, and there were some things I enjoyed and benefited from Tim Keller. But when he died, a very famous member of his church, Kirsten Powers, who went there for some years, said in her memorial about him, I didn't know they had that position. I didn't know they were pro-life. I didn't know that they thought homosexuality was a sin, because we didn't talk about that in church. So, I mean, that is a wildly different model.
Yeah, I think that's understating the case. It's not shocking. So, I hope that helped, guys. If you're new to this show or new to the culture wars, my goodness. Now, Megan, aren't you just like a divisive sister trying to sow dissension amongst the brethren? Because, I mean, listen, shouldn't we have a lot of Democrats and Republicans in our church? Because Jesus is neither left nor right. And you know what? What about those people, Megan, who their heart just beats faster and bigger for certain more consistent extensions of justice that the Democrat Party represents better than the Republican Party? And it's not that they're not pro-life, but they have a certain affinity towards certain justice issues that the Democrat, I can't even get through it, that the Democrat Party.
I'm so glad you brought this up. Yeah.
And so you're just being nasty towards your brothers and sisters in Christ, Megan, who that's just where God's called them.
Right. Okay.
How do you deal with that?
Here's what I want to say, and I'm actually going to quote Charlie to say this. Because, he took incredible heat from your Christianity Todays, from Russell Moore, from Tim Alberta of The Atlantic, and they called him a Christian nationalist for starting TPUSA Faith. And Charlie's response to that was, I am not trying to politicize the church. This is a defensive organization, TPUSA Faith. I am trying to expel the Marxism that has already infiltrated the church. And he was absolutely right about that. And the last interview I did with Charlie, it was 2 days before he was killed. We talked about the murder of Irina Zarutska here in Charlotte, where I live. And one of the things we talked about was how the policies that the pastors you're talking about, the ones who lionized and venerated George Floyd, who said that we must change our criminal justice system to deal with racism, they got their policy changes. They did. So they called for this. They aligned with the left, and their policy changes things like pretrial release, no cash bail, decriminalizing homelessness, referring criminals to mental health services instead of incarcerating them against their will or involuntarily committing them. We got those things. And that was the very thing that allowed DeCarlos Brown, Irina Zarutska's killer, to be out on the streets so that he could stab her in the neck. So that was what Charlie and I talked about. So even those policies, they mattered. When Matt Chandler and J.D. Greer and all of the entity heads of the Southern Baptist Convention put out a statement saying we need to reform our criminal justice system in the name of racial justice, they got the policy changes they were looking for, and that was the result. Yeah, so that was what Charlie and I talked about. And what I want to say about him is that, yes, I want Democrats to come to church, definitely come to church, but they shouldn't be comfortable there. They shouldn't hear things that make them feel comfortable and like, yes, I have the same worldview that is being preached from that pulpit. Because if they're not made uncomfortable by the things that are being preached from the pulpit, then that preacher is not teaching scripture. He's not preaching truth. Because frankly, there is no way to align a Democrat policy position with the God of the Bible. There's just not.
Wow, that's a lot to talk about. I hope this episode's blowing your mind, but we have to thank some of our favorite friends and sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, EveryLife Diaper Company. I know the founders of EveryLife Diaper Company. They were also very close friends with Charlie. This is a wonderful company, okay? And in the wake of George Floyd, BLM, Antifa, mostly peaceful riots, a lot of people realized that corporate America is pretty woke. And many of the companies that we used to love and rely on for things that we need for living our lives and taking care of our kids, a lot of those companies hate us and our values. And you know where that ends up, right? Eventually it ends up at assassination. That's why they say speech is violence. If you say men are not women, this is a real fight. If you want to fight the culture wars, the first thing you could do that's so easy is shop in alignment with your values. Only use your money with people and companies that support you and what you believe in. Most of the major diaper companies in America are pro-abortion. That's right. The baby industry, right? The people who profit if more babies are born. The vast majority of the major diaper companies support abortion. So if you're having babies, if the loved ones in your life are having babies, if the nursery at your church that has to get diapers every week because it's got a nursery is not getting diapers from EveryLife, what are you doing? Okay, no coterie, no Huggies. They're all left-wing pro-abortion. Go to everylife.com, promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order. That lets them know that we sent you, which supports both them and the Seth Gruber Show and us at the White Rose Resistance. The whiterose.life, L-I-F-E, promo code Seth10 for 10% off your first order. My wife and I love EveryLife Diaper Company. Thank you for sponsoring the Seth Gruber Show. That's the that's the thumbnail Megan Basham tweet right there.
There you go.
Well, that was really offensive, Megan.
I look forward to all the comments.
Thank you. That I mean, no, but it's like, listen, like, I don't need those answers,
Right?
but like a lot of people are waking up, Megan. Praise God, and they're seeing. I think this is one of the things Charlie's martyrdom and assassination did, is it almost brought the invisible war, the unseen war, and it made aspects of it visible. And people are seeing how demonic and evil the fights and little battles that you and I wage and our friends wage, and they're seeing them for what they really are.
Right.
That we're not just trying to rile people up and do a frenzy to donate to our ministries. We're not just trying to make sure that we
have a ministry.
We can get Trump to retweet us or get Elon Musk's attention or something stupid. It's like, no, like this is actually life and death. Okay. And so we should probably talk about how demonic and deadly the trans cult actually is. I don't know how much thinking you've been doing about this. I've been like, I can't sleep well. I'm like, my eyes are all dried because I've like weeped myself dry. But like, I mean, what's this new phenomenon of people etching leftist phrases into the casings of onto bullets?
Right.
I mean, didn't that happen with the United Healthcare CEO too?
It could have. I'll be honest with you. I don't know, but I mean, it's another good example that you have a left
Charlie's
that made that guy a hero.
Yep, and then Charlie too. It said, "Catch this, fascist."
Yeah.
And apparently, the rifle they found, which had like multiple bullets still in the, well, they said that actually the cartridge had not even been expelled from the bolt action rifle, and then there were other bullets in the bolt action magazine. And that they had leftist trans weird kind of etchings. Into that. So why? Okay, how about this, Megan? Why is the trans ideology so deadly? And is it fundamentally demonic?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think obviously not just from, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but not just from what it believes, but from its outworking. We can see that it is manifestly violent in nature. Not just, in these very high profile murders, but if you look at how these trans activists respond to, say, someone like J.K. Rowling, there's always this threat of violence, knives, pictures with guns. It seems to be part and parcel of that movement. Why? And I think part of the reason is you have such a fundamental rejection of self because God has made you a certain way. You are an embodied person and a figure, and this is the body that he gave you. And when all other things have already been rejected in a society, it's sort of the last thing you can do is go, I reject this body that you gave me, by marring it, by saying I refuse to accept how it was made. And so I heard something really profound, and then it's that when you can reject your own created image of God in yourself, it makes it so easy then for you to not see it in others and to inflict violence on others. Because if you can't accept your own humanity, then you don't see humanity in other people before you. And it makes it very easy to murder them and hurt them. So yes, I think it is part and parcel. And it's part of why at the time, I'm sure I seemed extremely militant. I think a lot of people have come around to my point of view. But at the time, when I hear megachurch pastors saying, we should do something like pronoun hospitality, and we should indulge this madness by using the wrong pronouns for a man, calling her she or her. That was incredible. That was feeding something demonic. And, at the time, I felt like people thought, well, maybe she's a little worked up over that. And now I think people are starting to get it, that no, this is a demonic ideology. And the last thing we should be doing is giving it aid and comfort.
Megan, your theological underpinnings probably won't allow you to do this, but
okay.
there's some charismatic churches that support us that would put you in the pulpit like that.
I'm good where I am. I'm a good journalist.
That was unreal. Oh
Thank
my
you.
gosh, you just spit so much fire. So. Okay,
I'm a solid Southern Baptist.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay, so I don't know. I guess you got me thinking, if killing babies is healthcare and carving your own genitals off is also healthcare, those are fundamentally violent ideologies.
Yes.
And so those who murder the unborn won't hesitate to murder their defenders. I mean, of course, transgenderism is a fundamentally violent ideology because it entails self-mutilation. And that, I think that was your point, is if that kind of hatred and denial of your own bodily integrity and humanity is actually freeing and liberating, then certainly murdering those who are preventing you from liberation is just defensive.
Yeah.
And so when they say speech is violence, that Charlie was violent for saying men are not women, then killing those people is an act of defense. And I guess also demons were the first ones to insist on plural pronouns.
Right.
So there's that. But so Megan, let's see. Tim Keller's brainchild is the Gospel Coalition.
Right. Yes.
And I'm so thankful for your explanation.
I'm going to do a squishy thing and say there are people that I like at the Gospel Coalition even today. I love Kevin DeYoung. I think Don Carson's great. So there are people that are good there. I just think that their desire to be seen as institutionally respectable. My friend Joe Rigney calls it the progressive gaze, Gaze.
Yeah, Joe's great.
I love Joe. And so when they think about the take that they should have or what they should publish about any issue, it's always with that progressive gaze of how do we not offend those people. And so that's really where I go with the Gospel Coalition. And I saw the same thing after Charlie's death. And what I really wish is that, you know, those people that I like that are affiliated with it, I wish they would get unaffiliated with it, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you remember a few months ago at the PCA General Assembly in Chattanooga, Kevin DeYoung's take to some kind gentleman who just came up and was like, so-and-so in our denomination, meaning PCA, was criticizing someone who was calling for like black-only assemblies, black-only worship nights.
Right. Erwin, and he's out, by the way. Erwin Ince is out, by the way.
And he was like, that's unacceptable. And then he reads from the Bible, don't show partiality. And he's being so, like, I guess, winsome and, like, respectful. And Kevin DeYoung just cuts him off, shuts him down. That's inappropriate. Don't talk like that about your superiors. I was like, I lost any remaining respect of Kevin.
I have been told.
That was pathetic.
You can hear it and you can take it for what it's worth. I've been told that it was not a point of disagreement with what the guy was saying, but that, you won't like this, Seth, but that there are Robert's Rules of Orders and that the guy said something that somehow fell afoul of the Robert's Rules of Orders process for how you do it. So I did inquire, just so you know, and this is what I was told, why that happened, that it wasn't that Kevin DeYoung disagreed with what was being said, but that it somehow was not following the correct form of Robert's Rules of Orders.
It's I guess it's Joey from Friends. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Anyways,
I'm just reporting to you what I was told about what happened in that moment. Because I agree.
That's okay.
When I heard the guy get up to the podium, and this is another large Protestant denomination, and I would say that the PCA punches way outside of its class in terms of size, but it is incredibly influential despite not being nearly as big as the Southern Baptist Convention, for example. And when they had, and this is part of what you and I have been talking about these last 4 or 5 years, they had the head of their mission board, a guy named Erwin Ince, who just resigned like within the last 2 weeks. He was advocating for segregated church groups, racially segregated church groups. So he was saying we should have, they're called affinity groups.
Oh.
Right. Small groups within our church that are just for our Black members. Or we should have small groups within our church that are just for our Hispanic or our Asian members, which was interesting about that to me because it was a little racist to me that they make the assumption, like, for example, that everyone Asian has the same background. Because I'm like, well, you've got Japanese, Korean, Chinese. I mean, which Asian? You just assume they're all the same and should all be in the same group. But anyway, so he advocated for that. He, under his watch, the mission board put out guidelines for illegal immigrants on how they could evade the law. So,
Whoa.
Right. Yes. So
Yikes.
Irwin Ince, I would say, was clearly a progressive actor with a high-level leadership role in what is supposed to be a theologically conservative denomination. And yet this was the kind of thing we saw him doing, to the point that that guy even needed to go up to the podium, needed to go up to that microphone and say, hey, we have a problem here. We have a guy leading one of our major entities calling for racially segregated church meetings because he feels that it's somehow harmful or dangerous to spend too much time in fellowship with his fellow Christians who are white.
Well, Megan, don't you remember your own quote? The 11th commandment.
Right.
Thou shalt not criticize your evangelical betters or leaders.
And look, I absolutely cheered that guy, and his name is escaping me right now, but there are clips circulating. Yeah. I'm like, that was a courageous guy. That was what we need, is guys to go up there and say what he said. So,
well, it's actually a great sort of almost screenshot of the kind of courage that all of us should be illustrating in our day-to-day lives, and the kind of courage that Charlie epitomized everywhere that he went. I mean, one of the things that anyone who knew Charlie well will tell you is that he was the same person everywhere he went.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that is not true of Big Eva and our evangelistic managerial institutional class. They are very different depending on what environment they're in. Which, by the way, you know what? Who else is like that? Whores and prostitutes. Actually, they behave very differently based off of what kind of environment they're in, and how much money they're being paid. And so, anyways, that was. I don't care if people were offended by that. So the Gospel Coalition, Tim Keller's brainchild. And so for you guys listening, that was an excellent breakdown of Tim Keller and what he presented to the American church on. Right. This is a winsome, very humble, evangelistic way to engage the culture for Jesus. And then, by the way, do you guys want to know the end of that story? Tim Keller died a registered Democrat in the state of New York 2 years after praising Stephen Colbert for his winsome articulation of the gospel in the public square. Stephen Colbert, who defends mutilating the genitals of children, third trimester abortions, gay surrogacy, gay marriage. But he was such a pillar of Christian winsomeness, according to Tim Keller. So just so you guys know how that story ended.
Also, a major booster of Francis Collins. I think, that close friendship and that, outside support that he had for getting evangelicals to back Francis Collins, that one, I just can't even wrap my head around it.
That's why I quoted you heavily in my article at Clear Truth Media, the most dangerous man in evangelicalism and those who platformed him, because these people's relationship with the deep state, and particularly with Fauci's boss, Francis Collins, I thought, in my article, tells, if I had to get one lay Christian to understand what's going on in evangelicalism, that's the one snapshot that will open your eyes more than almost anything else. But anyways, the Gospel Coalition is his brainchild. I mean, he co-founded it, to my understanding. I stopped reading the Gospel Coalition probably shortly after I graduated Westmont in 2014, back when I thought it was kind of cool and helpful and stuff. And so this guy, his name's Brett McCracken. He's most famous at the Gospel Coalition for watching pornography and finding a silver lining of a gospel thread. I'm only half joking, guys. But he writes these articles about filthy shows that Christians should not be watching. nudity, orgy scenes, rape scenes. But, you know, maybe they have a good evil conflict somehow in the show. And so Brett will watch things that Christians should not be watching. And then he'll write an article about finding the gospel silver lining sliver and applying the gospel in culture. And a lot of people have wondered, like, maybe what Brett McCracken's browser history looks like. Apparently, he just removed one of his favorite shows from his list on TGC. So he writes an article that, like, is actually halfway decent, which is saying something, from the Gospel Coalition. It's called, "Is Charlie Kirk's Assassination a Turning Point?" But I want to get your response to this, your take on this, but my first response to reading this was, this is just the bandwagon effect.
Right.
And I want to read you maybe just one paragraph for people to get this. Because why? Because what Megan told you earlier, guys, the Gospel Coalition and these groups are the ones that were smearing and attacking Charlie, having written articles about him, and if not directly, then like people on their staff, people on the editorial staff on their own private, like, you know, social medias. And like, Charlie's MAGA, he's a cult member. He just wants he just likes being invited to the White House. Trump's his favorite. He's the golden boy of Trump. I mean, like, these people, these evangelical publications never praised Charlie for being like a Christian ambassador or apologist, which, by the way, like, I just had Allie Beth on. I've been processing this on my show as well. Just so everyone remembers, like, yes, Charlie talked about like sort of like strange, nuanced political debates that the normal American probably isn't seasoned in. But that was not what he trafficked in. Like, if you want to think, like, what's a viral Charlie Kirk reels? Like, what is he known for? Primarily, it's been his defense of the resurrection, pro-life, marriage. Men should work hard, actually, and you shouldn't play video games and look at porn. And make sure your wife doesn't have to. Yeah, make sure your wife doesn't have to work. So it's like someone can be at home with the kids. It's okay to want borders around your country. These were the things he was mostly known for, not for like a breakdown of the Steele dossier, although he was very gifted in political commentary. The stuff he really trafficked in was the kind of stuff that you would think the Gospel Coalition and our evangelical institutions and publications would be like applauding. The point is, they never did that with him, but now he gets a bullet in the neck. He gets martyred for beliefs that he always brought back to a Christian worldview. Mm-hmm. He always brought back to the scriptures. And now watch this. Brett McCracken at TGC, Megan, says, something is stirring among young people today who are deeply dissatisfied with the status quo. Social media is killing them. Cancel culture terrifies them. Ideological conformity on many college campuses is stifling. And shaping events like the COVID-19 pandemic now feel like one big deception that didn't need to ruin their lives. Pause. TGC told people to get the jab.
Right?
And he said,
and
young
keep
people.
Your churches shut. And
Yeah, young people are hungry for a different, better way to live, for stable truth and time-tested tradition. They are primed for renewal. And then he says, my church was packed with 20-somethings this past Sunday. What's wrong with this? What does it tell us? And what's your response to this?
Well, what's so shocking about it, right, is I'm like, yes, you're right. They are primed for renewal. And it was Charlie Kirk and his, no holds barred, just bold statements of truth that were drawing them. And so why do you not follow that model? Why do you not follow the Charlie Kirk model? Because you're right, Seth. I mean, when he was alive, they would have had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk. They would certainly not. And
they didn't.
Right.
Right. Like Summit Ministries, my buddy Jeff over there, they brought Charlie to Summit.
Right.
So good people brought, but did TGC ever bring Charlie to an event? Ever ask him to even come on the podcast?
Can you even imagine it? You can't even bring up that image in your mind of Charlie Kirk.
Oh my gosh, Tim Keller's son, Michael Keller, would just rise and start attacking everyone would have lost their minds.
So yeah, and here's what I do hope though. I'm gonna say, I hope that Brett McCracken and the Gospel Coalition mean that. I hope they see it, that they go, wow, there is a renewal happening, and we weren't a part of the front end of this. And let's be honest, you weren't. So now that you see it happening, maybe consider why those kids were drawn to Charlie. Consider why TPUSA was growing like wildfire, why the TPUSA faith conferences that you and I have both participated in were packed out and were so energized. And you saw all of these young people coming out, meeting new friends, spouses. They were getting together. All of the things that TGC says it's supposed to be about. Consider why their model didn't create that renewal, but Charlie Kirk's model did. So I'm going to really hope that it is a turning point specifically for TGC. For Christian, I actually think Christianity today is hopeless, but I hope for TGC, I hope they look at it and go, actually, boldness in speaking the truth is attractive and it draws people. And we don't have to be the most intellectual kid on the block. We just have to be like Paul and say, I have determined to know nothing but Christ and Christ crucified, because that's what Charlie Kirk did. And he was totally unapologetic that these are my beliefs because I know nothing but Christ. So instead of trying to, intellectualize reasons that you don't have to boldly speak that truth, just do that and then be a part of the renewal.
I have one more thing I want to ask you about. But you know what? Your just amazing dialogues right now. It's making me think of this line from J. Gresham Machen just over 100 years ago. And I wish that Brett McCracken and TGC could really understand this quote. It could really understand how they missed the ball. And I would like to see some repentance and apologies, actually. But he said, presenting an issue sharply is indeed by no means a popular business at the present time. There are many who prefer to fight their intellectual battles in what has aptly been called a condition of low visibility. Clear-cut definition of terms in religious matters, bold facing of the logical implications of religious views is by many persons regarded as an impious proceeding. But with such persons, we cannot possibly bring ourselves to agree. Light may seem at times to be an impertinent intruder, but it is always beneficial in the end. The type of religion which rejoices in the pious sound of traditional phrases, regardless of their meanings, or shrinks from controversial matters, will never stand amid the shocks of life. In the sphere of religion, as in other spheres, the things about which men are agreed are apt to be the things that are least worth holding. The really important things are the things about which men will fight.
I opened my book with that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and absolutely. Get in the fight. That's what get in the fight. Fight for the kingdom. I mean, you don't want to think of it as a culture war. Don't think of it as a culture war. Think of it as we are fighting for souls for the kingdom, because that's what Charlie was doing.
Well, Megan, all of this, okay, guys, all of this stuff we're talking about, why people fight, why they don't fight, how they justify it theologically for the sake of the kingdom, why new narratives are being built, why new strategies to these battles are being constructed, largely because of Charlie's martyrdom. All of these things are conversations and fights that people like Megan have been in for a while. They're not new to that fight. But you have seen some recent fruit to that fight, to that struggle, and it pertains to the ERLC, the Ethics Religious Liberty Commission, which is the political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination in America. Do you want to share some good news with us today on the show about probably, in my opinion, guys, almost directly because of your best-selling book, Shepherds for Sale? Why don't you share it with us?
Yeah, and I'll give some credit to Charlie, too, and his efforts to expel Marxism, because he had me on to talk about this and had me at the conferences when, I had almost no following. So the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, again, as you said, Seth, is the policy arm of the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., Southern Baptist Convention. And for nearly 15 years, they have been in bed with the Evangelical Immigration Table, which is a Soros-backed amnesty open borders group. So they've been
you can't prove that, Megan.
Yes, I can, and I proved it in the book. I'm like, I had the documents, I had the receipts. It is absolutely a Soros-funded group. It's part of the National Immigration Forum. There's legally no difference between the Evangelical Immigration Table and the left-wing National Immigration Forum. They are the same entity. So it's essentially just the Christian face of this left-wing open borders group that was funded and is still funded by George Soros. So For 15 years, the ERLC has been a part of that. I've been banging the drum. Many others were banging the drum before me saying, this is a left-wing, Soros-funded Marxist organization that wants to erase sovereign borders. It wants to erase sovereign nations and have just sort of this one world, free-floating, where anyone can come into our country. And at that point, you don't have a country. So, we had been for years highlighting the fact that this is an organization that is backed by secular left-wing Marxists, and they denied it. You showed them the receipts. You showed them that Soros's own board books claim credit and say that we have been working with Southern Baptists and evangelical Christians to pass these amnesty bills. So they actually say it in George Soros's own documents. Well, just today, hot off the presses, after much pressure from people like you, from people like Charlie, and people like me, they have announced they have finally cut ties with the evangelical immigration table and this Soros-backed organization. So we're celebrating. And that, along with, for example, Erwin Ince's resignation in the PCA, we're starting to see real wins. And it's taken time, and it's taken, just a slog. And I know you feel like I do that. Look, for some of us, we had to throw our reputations on the bonfire to get here. But when I see this, it was worth it, and I would do it all again.
Well, I mean, I always thought it was weird, personally, Megan, that the ERLC selected a president that has like a name that sounds like a gay porn star, like Brent Leatherwood. Like, I'm sorry, like I every once in a while, Megan, you probably thought that was a step too far, but every once in a while I look at like certain names and I'm like Russell Moore. Like, who wants more of himself than Russell? Or like one of Kinsey's informants that gave him rape data from Nazi occupied Poland. His name was Dr. Fritz von Balusek.
Was it really?
Brent Leatherwood. There's several others. Oh, the Democrat politician in California behind all the putting men in women's prisons and decreasing penalties for pedophiles. His last name's Wiener. Anyways, I'm
a Basham, and I think some of the times these things are providential.
And you just you're like a hammer in search of a nail.
Yeah, God knew.
I know that sounds weird. People are going to rip me in the comments for that one, but that's weird. Okay. Those were the last two presidents of the ERLC was Russell Moore and Brent Leatherwood. It just seems weird to me. And then Brent Leatherwood was trying to stop the release of the manifesto of a weird sexually depraved trans person who murdered Christian kids in Nashville. It's like, what weird sex stuff do you have going on, Brent Leatherwood?
That's another win, by the way.
It's just weird to me. What happened with that, by the way?
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying is we have had some real wins from these efforts, and a lot of people have had to sort of be drummed out of the respectability circle to get these wins, but it was absolutely worth it. So Brent Leatherwood, after a lot of unhappiness, they called a vote at the last June, the Southern Baptist Convention. So it meets every summer, for a couple of days. And so they called a vote to abolish the ERLC. And the vote went down narrowly. But you have to know how key it is that it was even a narrow vote, because that room is filled almost entirely with people who work for the Southern Baptist Convention entities. So wow. To have that kind, I think it was something like 43% voted to abolish it. That's a huge vote of no confidence. So after that, especially given the advantage they had in the room. So after that, I think you saw an executive committee that said, we have a problem here. And so Brent Leatherwood was out. He resigned. And then we have now seen them cutting ties with the evangelical immigration table. With the PCA, we've seen Erwin Ince out. It took them a long time, but they finally addressed, the revoice, infiltration, and side B, gay Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, all of this is an encouragement to keep going. And as we see the reaction to Charlie's death, I think that's an encouragement to keep going too, because we see what he modeled. And as we sort of took that and on a smaller stage, modeled it further in our own denominations and ministries that we're connected to, we are seeing a house cleaning. We're seeing some tables that have long needed to be turned over, get turned over. So I'm celebrating this.
We could talk for hours about just the shakings shiftings and changings that seem to be happening in people's hearts, their minds, their cities, their communities, their families, and their political philosophies just in the last week and a half. And praise God for it. And Charlie will not have died in vain, but the Lord's on the move. Amen. Aslan's on the move. And we're grateful for you, Megan. I hope you and the hubby go celebrate the ERLC cutting ties with Soros-funded groups, because you deserve most of the credit, if not all of the credit for that. So you better go to a nice dinner, okay, tonight. You better go have a nice date night because that's something to celebrate.
Yes, and let me tell you what's so funny is I'm so into these things that my 16-year-old daughter knew exactly what I was talking about when I said it, and she goes, "We have to go out to dinner." So even my daughter knew.
Yeah, that's such a parenting win.
Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, well, hey Megan, be safe and keep up the good work. Remember, Hilaire Belloc said, "A good man or woman is known by the enemies he makes." And so you've got all the right enemies. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, my friend.